in that regard.
The honourable member for Cypress Hills Grasslands.
Mr. Speaker, this past week, the world's longest ruling tyrant died. Canadians were appalled to hear the Prime Minister state, and I quote, "It is with deep sorrow that I learned today of the death of Cuba's longest-serving president." Well, Mr. Speaker, he was Cuba's longest-serving president because he persecuted, oppressed, and killed those who opposed him. The Prime Minister and the Foreign Affairs Minister should have condemned his legacy rather than mourning their loss. How could the Liberals celebrate such a vicious reality?
Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Instead, I want to thank my colleague to give me the opportunity to repeat again. In fact, most leaders around the world have said about the same than the Prime Minister, that at a time where the people of Cuba will go to transition, we hope, toward more freedom and democracy, we need to support them and to encourage them to not antagonize about the past, but to unify all of them together to give to their children a better future. And we may count on Canada for that. We have 50 years of unbroken relationship with Cuba, and we'll have a Prime Minister that has strong links with Cuba that will help for that.
Member for Calgary-Shepherd.
Mr. Speaker, my family fled the communist regime in Poland, so I know a little bit about communist repression. After decades of brutal repression in Cuba, this past weekend was a time that Cubans could finally dream for freedom. Under Castro's rule, Cubans who opposed him faced torture, imprisonment, forced exile, or death by firing squad. Why would the Prime Minister choose to celebrate Fidel Castro when he should be looking at ways to empower the Cuban people?
Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, it's precisely in order to help the people of Cuba to be united instead of antagonizing about the past that we need to encourage them to do the reforms that will bring them more freedom and toward democracy. And the fact that Canada had a strong support for the people of Cuba over the last 50 years under conservative as liberal governments will be an asset, and we'll have a work to do. I suggest to everyone to practice your Spanish.
Excellent. Member for Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan. Order.
Mr. Speaker, we want a better future for the Cuban people, and the way we remember the past shapes the future. The Liberals are cozying up to dictators the world over in Cuba, China, Iran, Belarus, and Russia, and ignoring questions of fundamental justice, freedom of the press, and every single type of minority rights. The Liberals' campaign for the UN Security Council seat seems to involve ignoring the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. When will the Prime Minister stand up, apologize to the victims of this brutal regime, and finally express his solidarity with the Cuban people?
The Honourable Minister of Foreign
Mr.
Affairs.
Speaker, the fact is the Cuban people have different views about that. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, and the only way to help them to move on in order to have an improved society with freedom and democracy is to not antagonize about the past as my colleagues want to do. Is to focus on the future altogether, Canadians united with the people of Cuba, to support them all the way, and we'll do it under the leadership of this Prime Minister.